Hi everyone. You may be aware that there are a lot of proposed chronologies, revised chronologies, for ancient Egypt and other nations in the Near East and the Middle East. So the conventional chronology, to put this into perspective, places Ramesses the Great in the 13th century BCE. But some of these revised chronologies, for example, the revised chronology of Velikovsky, on the extreme end of things, places Ramesses the Great in the 7th century BCE. So that's a difference of 600 years. But on the less extreme side of things, you've got the revised chronology of Peter James, and he brings forward Ramesses the Great by just 200 years. So there's a wide range of revised chronologies, but almost all the time, when people argue for one of these, they claim that this revised chronology of the archaeology of the Mediterranean and the Middle East works better with the Bible. They say that a lot of things about the Bible are cleared up. The Bible suddenly fits in with all the evidence when you use their favoured revised chronology. But in this video I'm going to take a look at whether that's actually the case or not. So I'm going to look at this video at the time from Joseph, the one with the fancy coat and the dreams about the future, until the time of the Exodus. So that covers a span of about 250 years, according to the Bible. Not 400 years, but about 250 years. So the Bible's chronology places the Exodus in about 1500 BCE, whereas Joseph, of course, would therefore be in the 18th century, around the middle of the 18th century BCE. So that's when the Bible places these events, these characters, and therefore the Israelite settlement of Egypt would be between the 18th and the 16th centuries. So does that best fit with the currently accepted chronology or a revised chronology? Would it be better if we brought forward the archaeology of Egypt by several centuries? Well, as it happens, it's known and is widely accepted that the period between the 18th century and the 16th century experienced a major influx of Semitic peoples, including, in particular, peoples from Canaan. And there's linguistic evidence, as in evidence from documents, and by looking at the names, we can see that many of these people, these Semitic people, were actually specifically Hebrews. But then, after the 16th century, this Semitic occupation of northern Egypt diminished greatly. So that matches perfectly with the Bible's account of people from Canaan and the surrounding area migrating to Egypt in the time of Joseph, because it wasn't just Joseph's family, it was other people as well. The reason they went there is because of famine. So other Semitic people as well went to Canaan, and then the Hebrews grew in number, and then after the 16th century they left in a massive exodus. So that perfectly matches the archaeological record of this extensive Semitic occupation of the north of Egypt between the 18th and the 16th centuries. If, on the other hand, we used one of these revised chronologies, which brings forward the archaeology of Egypt by several centuries, then that would mean that during the time in which the Bible says that Semitic peoples occupied the north of Egypt, there is in fact no archaeological evidence for extensive Semitic settlement of Egypt. And then finally, when there is this archaeological evidence of this Semitic settlement of Egypt, that is just after the Bible says there was the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt. So that is the complete opposite of what the Bible says. That doesn't work at all. Another little detail about the Bible's account of these events is that when Joseph was sold as a slave to some traders who were travelling to Egypt by his jealous 10 half-brothers, he was sold for 20 pieces of silver. But then later on in the time of Moses, the time of the Exodus, when the Mosaic law was established, the price of a slave is given as 30 pieces of silver. Now that corresponds exactly with the average price of a slave in what is currently believed to be the 18th century and the average price of a slave in what is currently believed to be the 16th century on the basis of archaeology. But again, if you move forward the archaeology of Egypt and the surrounding nations by several centuries, then suddenly the Bible's account of the price of slaves at different time periods doesn't match the archaeologically established dates of the price of slaves at those time periods. So there's definitely not a correspondence in that regard. And we can go further as well, because in the account of the Exodus, famously, Pharaoh, when he's chasing the Israelites, he uses hundreds of war chariots. He pursues them with these chariots. But chariots were only introduced into Egypt during the Hyksos period, which was during the period of extensive Semitic settlement of Lower Egypt, which was northern Egypt, between the 18th and 16th centuries. So again, if we're assuming that actually that archaeological established dates are wrong and they need to be brought forward by several centuries, then that means that the Exodus would be placed in an archaeological time period in which chariots were not even used in Egypt. So clearly that doesn't work either. So in other words, in summary, the Bible's internal chronology clearly works best with the currently accepted archaeological chronology of that part of the world. It doesn't work at all when we apply one of the many revised chronologies of Egypt and surrounding nations. In the future, we'll have a look at some other aspects of the Bible's chronology, such as the period from the time of Moses onwards until the time of Solomon.